Hey neighbor, welcome back to ARTV. It's time to review the 7th studio album Viva Las Vengeance by the former band turned solo act of Brendon Urie, Panic at the Disco. This is their first album that was ever recorded entirely to tape, and as somebody who can really appreciate a modern album like Wasting Light by the Foo Fighters that does that, I felt myself getting excited for new Panic music for the first time in quite a while. SInclair and Viola assisted Brendon Urie in producing this album and making it a live affair and the way that it was recorded, and while I really do respect the authenticity that brings, I feel that the Las Vegas themes that Brendon is once again focusing in on are definitely done before, especially by Panic. I look back to Too Weird to Live, Too Rare to Die. That album really captured the feeling of Brendon Urie in Vegas, but this seems to be him reframing it as something fresh when it really doesn't feel that way to me. Let's start with the first song on this album. It's the title track, the lead single, Viva Las Vengeance. This track really did floor me in many ways because it has so much ambition and energy, it's hard not to like. It really does seem to comment on some of the stuff that Brendon has been faced with members leaving, allegations, everything like that, and it turns some of the commentary on its head and points it back at the listener. I think it's a really smart tune, and I found myself coming back to it again and again. Supercharged guitars, some pianos in the mix. It really actually felt like a band playing behind him. I really was feeling hopeful for this album, but the follow-up singles started to chip away at my confidence. And coming out of an era that I just could not stand or fathom, the whole Broadway pop musical gone wrong aesthetic that they had on Pray for the Wicked, this is a step up from that, but after having spent a significant chunk of time listening to this new album, I just feel that the results are okay, and kind of a mediocre version of a Queen cover band. There are some pretty stunning highlights in the mix here, so I'm not trying to say that this album isn't without its positives. In fact, I would say that the positives probably slightly outweigh the negatives. But if you come into this album expecting anything in the form of originality or a fresh creative idea, I just don't know that it's here, because listening through this album really does see the Queen worship getting dialed up to 11, and while of course Brendon Urie is self-aware about that, it doesn't necessarily change the fact that I don't really feel it. Another major roadblock facing Viva Las Vengeance is Brendon's inability to notice that he's not really killing it when he's hitting some of those high notes. It gets a little bit unbearable in places where he's singing in this higher register. Look to the track Don't Let the Light Go Out as a prime example. He's really straining on some of these hooks to go up there and get it like he's Freddie Mercury, except he doesn't really have that power, or else it's not really captured in a very good way in this live to tape setting. Trying to resurrect the image of 60s and 70s rock is very evident throughout the record, but it also makes this album feel a little bit one-noted. There are some really catchy choruses. I think a song like Sugar Soaker is very fun, but it does lose its luster a bit with repeated listens, as you kind of notice that so many of the tracks feel similar to each other, and not really in a, oh, this complements the other one type of situation. Now, obviously, I think a lot of the cheesiness that's dialed up is self-aware, and they're trying to be tongue-in-cheek with some of the commentary. Star Spangled Banner comes to mind. It doesn't necessarily pay off in the way that you would want it to, because tracks like that really grind my gears because of the way that they kind of stop-start and the way the chorus doesn't necessarily feel like it complements the verses. That's kind of a recurring nightmare for this album, and I know that the track Middle of a Breakup got a lot of shit just in general for its lyrics. I personally think it's a fine tune, but again, the chorus feels totally out of place in contrast to the verses that actually do a pretty good job of setting things up. From a purely musical perspective, I feel like the album has a lot of strengths to the instrumentals, although the lyrics definitely leave something to be desired. I feel like tracks like Local God actually have a decent amount of commentary packed in, but they don't really capitalize on that. I like hearing about Panic's rise to fame, but it's done so in a way that feels specific to them. Unlike the last album, tracks like High Hopes, as fun as they might be as pop bangers, they don't necessarily get into the depth of what I would actually want to come back to. That's really the summarizing problem that crops up again and again for me on Viva Las Vengeance. And while there's tracks like Sad Clown that I actually do have a decent amount of appreciation for, I really feel like many of them just start to fumble the delivery the closer we get to the end zone. We look at something about Maggie and it just feels like some sort of Queen clone that I didn't ask for. Viva Las Vengeance could have and should have been a lot better for all of the work that was clearly put in. It seemed like they were doing the right thing in terms of production, in terms of approaching the album, trying to get a more authentic live sound. It just doesn't pay off because a lot of it comes out like worshiping older styles of music instead of giving it your own unique twist. There's some great songs in there, namely the title track, Say It Louder is a very catchy, fun song. There's also something like Sad Clown that gets a little bit wild and bombastic, but they're able to reel it in a way that works. But there's also cuts like Do It to Death that feel like they're racing towards the top of the mountain, but they don't really deliver, and that's why I'm ultimately just feeling a bit not satisfied, not necessarily negative, but not really all that positive, because the album commits the crime of being stale and a little bit boring. I'd say it's on par with Death of a Bachelor for me, meaning I'm rating it a 3 out of 5. Disappointing? Danceable? Disaster? How is this album sitting with you? I would love to hear your thoughts on Panic at the Disco's Viva Las Vengeance in the comments section down below. Don't forget to hit that like button, and remember, this is all just my opinion, so let me hear about yours. If you want to check out more of my Panic videos, then you can tap the cards on screen here, and I'll see you soon for more on ARTV.